Can you guys all hear me okay? Okay. I can hear everything great.
To order. Give the roll. Sure. Highland? Here. Piper? Here. Ryan?
Here.
Lewis?
Here.
Bastian?
Here.
Monday.
Present.
We have a quorum.
Great. All right. This meeting has been appropriately posted and noticed in accordance with state laws.
Yes.
Great. All right, let's move on to number 4, approving the agenda. It was indicated to me that out of courtesy to the folks that are here for the hearings, that we might want to move unfinished business till after new business. So if anybody is in favor of that, you can make a motion.
I'll motion
amend
to, I'll motion to approve to move up the public speaking and old business later, excuse me.
I'll second that.
All right, I've got a motion and a second to rearrange the agenda. Any discussion on that? All those in favor signify by aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Great, we've got a slightly modified agenda that we can work with. All right. Number 5, minutes from the July Plan Commission meeting. I'll entertain a motion to either approve as written or amend if anybody's got anything.
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes from 7/9/2020 Plan Commission meeting.
I'll second that.
Great, I've got a motion and a second. All those in favor signify by aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, thank you. Minutes are approved. All right, item 6, citizen comments. Do we have any citizens here that want to make a general comment? And if none, Matthew, did you receive anything that was to be read into the record?
Not under this section.
Okay. Anyone? All right. All right, 7, we moved toward the end of the agenda, so let's get right into number 8, new business. We'll go in order here. We've got a public hearing to review the request of Troy Gates for conditional use permit for the outdoor sale of vehicles at 250 Commerce Drive. So, all right.
Let me, first, would you open the public hearing? Chairperson?
Yeah. All right, I'd like to open the public hearing for the listed property. Do you have an introduction,
Yes.
Matthew?
Yep. Just before we take any comments for or against, I just want to give an update. There's a staff report that went out in your packet that has been amended, and I submitted that to via email before the meeting, and I printed a copy for everybody here in the council chambers. So I've been in contact with the broker and Mr. Gates regarding this proposal for probably about a month now. And one of the things in my initial review that I used the power of 114.12 to basically determine this property and the zoning on this property is similar to some recent projects, most notably Timty Taylor's. That is got a conditional use permit basically across the street at Duffy Fleet Services for outdoor storage of vehicles to sell their grain trailers. And essentially, I recommended that the conditional use process be followed for their application. There was at one point we considered potentially having to go through a rezoning process, but looking at the code, this is very similar to other projects that we've done. and I recommended a conditional use. So this is what we have in front of you. At first, we had a couple different concepts, but ultimately the applicant has decided the first phase of their project is basically finishing out the existing strip center that is there. If you visited the site, they're 8,000 square feet, which is the unfinished portion, basically doesn't even have a concrete floor in there. So there's a substantial amount of work they need to do to the building. So before they expand their parking lot or expand any services out there, the first thing they're going to do is finish the building. So when you look at the conditional use permit, usually we ask for a landscaping plan, lighting plan, grading plan. Because they're not doing anything to the site itself, it's all on the building, those plans are not required at this time. You'll notice one of the conditions I'm recommending for the approval is that basically if they go and add a parking lot, then obviously they need to submit the plans and go through their approvals for that. But at that time, that would just be an internal site plan review, not, or as I envision it would be just reviewed by staff. Once we're approving them for this use at this property. So you can see out there that basically this kind of fits the zoning, it fits the nature of the area, and the future land use map. One thing that I also looked at for the staff report is the parking required. There's 87 stalls out there. Based on the plan of operation that they have submitted, we anticipate that approximately at most, they would need 46 for their operation. That's probably being very conservative, but being that they have 87 stalls, there's more than enough parking for what they have proposed. So I will just get right into the recommendations and go through that. So one of the things that I've talked about with the applicant was because they're not doing anything to the landscaping plan, and he's indicated the willingness to make this attractive, basically restoring the landscaping that's out there, and then also taking care of the weeds. The lot that is to the north of the building is pretty much overgrown with weeds, and that's something that the city would like to see that remedied as part of this conditional use. Any refuse will be screened, as required by code. There is a dumpster enclosure behind the building, so that shouldn't be an issue. It's already there. The applicant will store all vehicles in need of repair at another location. There might be temporary, but as the applicant indicated in his application, they have a full service center up the road in Beaver Dam. So if anything's here that is in need of significant repairs, it would not be longer than 24 hours, if that. As I mentioned earlier, future development for this site will need approved plans as required by conditional use. This actually, I updated that. It helps if I'm actually reading the most current version. Sorry, I just realized that. I apologize. All future building or site improvements for parcel 151204 shall need approved plans that are required under a conditional use, which is outlined under 11426 of our zoning code. The conditional use permit shall remain in effect as long as the conditions upon which the permit was issued are followed. So basically, whatever recommendations we put, we are expecting him to follow, and it's good for the life as long as he meets the conditions. The conditional use permit will expire if parcel number 11211 151204 is not used for outdoor sales of motor vehicles for 365 consecutive days. So this one is in there to essentially, if for whatever reason, Gates Automotive goes out of business and the site sits vacant, any sort of new used, or any sort of car dealer that wants to store their vehicles outside will have to come in and get a conditional use permit for that property. The way, the conditional use permits, the way our city attorney interprets it, they basically run with the property. And this kind of limits it. If they should go out of business, then basically it reverts back to, they would have to come in and get our approval. So, the plan of operation that is in your packet, I would ask that the applicant would revise that if there are substantial changes to the plan of operation. If they're adding one employee, they don't need to tell me. If they're changing their hours till 7:30, they don't have to tell me. But if they all of a sudden say, oh, we're going to be a 24-hour car dealership, which I don't know if you can by statute, that's something that we need to be aware of if something significant changes out there. And then also just the last one as a catch-all is the applicant is still required to obtain all necessary building permits, sign permits, and any other permits needed to conduct business at the site. Is there any other discussion on the recommendations at this point? Or the site plan? I mean, I know there's a lot of material in there, but with the plans we received, this has been reviewed at DT. There are no concerns from our engineer, our attorney, our DPW director, and our city administrator. As I said, the site is really at this point they're just building out the existing building, so there's not a lot of review that was needed on their behalf. And obviously the big one will be getting the building plans reviewed, so.
Okay. Do the applicants have anything to add? Yeah, yep, go ahead and step up and.
Sure, absolutely.
Thank you.
So I've been in business for over 30 years. I started Gates Collision Centers in 1990, actually out by the North Bristol Sportsman Club. So I'm no stranger to the area. I built that up to 19 locations and sold it to a publicly traded company. And so now my goal is to do something similar now with the used car industry. So the idea is with GatesAuto.com is to provide an online virtual dealership combined with a physical presence. So at the end of the day, the goal here is to run a very professional operation, keep it very clean, professional, or build trust. Is going to be a key part of it. That's what I would be concerned if I was a city administrator, and that's what I'm going to follow through with as a business owner for 30 years.
Okay.
Any
Thanks.
other questions?
I don't have any for you specifically. Commissioners, if you have anything specific for Troy? Okay,
Yeah, thank you.
thanks. All right. All right, any other questions from commission? I do have a couple, but
For me or for the applicant?
yeah, Matthew, this actually question is for you, actually.
Okay.
Under your recommendations, number 3, is the intent to avoid anything that might be considered an eyesore?
Yes.
Okay. Do we need to clear up that, a vehicle in need of repair might need a new transmission, right? But that's not an eyesore.
Yeah. We can
So-
definitely expound on what I wrote. I know it's not.
Right, so I don't want somebody to interpret that or the applicant to feel like they need to move something that's not got a cosmetic problem,
Yeah.
to some off-site location. So I guess I'd maybe propose amending that to the applicant will store all vehicles in need of visible body repair to an off-site location. what do we mean by other location? The Shopko parking lot? That doesn't really count, does it?
Well, they would need permission, but, I mean.
Right.
Well, I mean, we could specifically spell out, I mean, they put in their application packet that they're gonna be taking it to, their location in Beaver Dam.
Okay.
Which the address is,
Or we could say something like a location, if the location's within the city, that it's a permitted use for that location, something of that sort.
if that's what the commission, would recommend, that.
Right, something like where, right, if they're in Beaver Dam, it's Beaver Dam's problem, that's great, but, okay. So I would say to a location where outdoor storage is a permitted use. Is there anything under our zoning code, Matthew, that has outdoor storage as a permitted use?
Not without a conditional use or not without screening. So if you had like if it's fenced off, then it's permitted under, for
Okay.
certain types of zoning, but, I think, they've indicated that they are not gonna be storing these vehicles on site, so, I think if we put that they'll be storing them at, an off-site facility, where that use is permitted
Permitted,
is
yeah.
probably,
Yep. Yep, all right, I like that. Just so there's no confusion on, what's too
So I
strict or
said,
what's too
parent,
liberal.
applicant will store all vehicles with visible body damage at a permitted off-site location.
Yeah, or an off-site location where outdoor storage is permitted. I mean, they could always come back for a conditional use at a different site that's convenient to them and a
Yeah.
little out of the, I mean, there's different variations, but we don't have to get into all the different stripes at the moment. And then this question is also for you, Matthew.
Yep.
Because they're only doing interior building work right now, really nothing there has a conditional use to it, but I'm assuming that the applicant wants some certainty that we are going to allow outdoor usage before you're gonna put money into this facility, right? That's the whole gist of doing this now,
Yes.
just so that's clear to everybody.
Well, that, and, I mean, theoretically, he could have opened already if he was just gonna have a showroom indoors.
Well, right.
The way our
right,
code reads is once you start selling them in a lot outside, then, then that's when
Okay.
this level of review comes in.
Sure, but this primes the pump for that
Yes.
ultimate goal. Okay, great. That's it for me.
Just to clarify, the closing is actually September 4th, and
Okay.
it was conditional upon, the use being permitted.
Sure, okay, great. Thanks for being organized. Very, very much appreciated. It doesn't always happen, All right. Okay, anything else for the public hearing here? All right, I'll open it up to any member of the public that wants to speak at this public hearing. It's the first notice for that. I'll ask a second time if there's anyone of the public that wishes to speak at this hearing. And for a third and final time, is there anyone of the public that wishes to speak at this public hearing? Hearing none, I'll close the public hearing for conditional use permit for outdoor sale of vehicles at 250 Commerce Drive. All right, last opportunity for the commission to make deliberation. Anybody have anything further to add? Okay. Great, all right, then I will entertain a motion for recommendation to council.
I'll move to recommend this to the council.
Just to clarify on that motion, that with the recommended conditions?
Yes.
Okay, with the recommended additions, including the revised
Recommendations. from-
recommendation from Uriah on
Yes.
item number 3. Okay, I just wanted to make sure that's clear, so when I revise the council packet, because I just want to make sure I have the right information in
No,
there, so sorry.
Thank you for clearing me up.
I'll second that.
All right, we have a motion and a second to approve, or to recommend to council to approve the conditional use plan with the 8 conditions proposed, including the third recommendation as amended during discussion. All right, I have a motion and a second, so all those in favor of that signify by aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Sounds like unanimous. Matthew's writing furiously, so I
Yeah,
can
no, I
take a minute to take a swig.
No, that's a good idea. I think,
Okay, great. Let's move on to,
Thank you, gentlemen. Promise to be a good corporate citizen.
thank you.
the next step, this will go to council on Tuesday, the 18th? 18th, yes. So this will go there. I mean, you're more than welcome to attend that meeting via Zoom or come here in person if you choose. So, and I'll follow up with you later about that, but I just wanted to let you know before you left.
Thanks
Yep.
again.
Yep.
Thanks.
Also,
Okay.
just so we know, we also have Chris Aguina, I hope I didn't butcher that, Chris, from Sunny Nutrition, and he is here awaiting item number F under new business. Can we address him and then kind of continue with the rest of the meeting, being that he's here as a guest?
Yeah, I think we can do that without amending the agenda. I don't even see him on the agenda that I've got, but
Matt, do we need to make a motion to close the public hearing?
Yeah, it was,
Or is it just?
I
call
closed
three
it.
the
times
cha-
and it's closed?
the chair can close it without a motion, I thought.
Okay.
yeah, the requirement, as I understand it, is just to make sure that it's asked 3 times of the public. So,
Here's the agenda.
okay, yeah, I'm,
It's F is review the chapters and comprehensive.
yeah, the agenda I've got doesn't even have Chris on here, to be honest with you.
It was in the packet, but I didn't see it on
Uh-oh.
Yeah, I didn't notice that.
That is bad.
the agenda. I didn't know it was just.
Stand by while Matthew researches.
Wow.
It's after the.
It is posted,
It
so
is,
I,
okay, all
I-
right, then
I
I've
sent
got
out-
it, then I've got an older copy or
I
something.
sent out the wrong,
Okay.
whew.
Okay,
Oh, I was worried there that I screwed something
Okay.
up, so,
we're here.
Because we're not at liberty to add things, are we?
correct,
Right.
no, but this is
We're at
posted on
liberty
the-
to move things around, but
No.
not add them. Okay.
Yes, so this is posted, I apologize for the confusion on that. You know, you get more than like 2 items on a plan commission agenda, and I don't know what to do, I guess, so.
Just too much excitement.
Yeah, so, I will, kick this one off, and then I will let Chris say anything that he wants to add. This is one of those, items that ends up being, I guess, more of a technicality than anything else. When you, look at our code, and I should probably pull the citations up in front of me so I can speak intelligently on it. So the former Caldwell lumber retail / office building that is on the corner of Dickinson and Church Street, right now the property owner has done some work on the inside and now is trying to rent that out. He has a tenant that is interested in that Columbus Nutrition. Right now they have a store in Sun Prairie and they offer their name in Sunny Nutrition. But under 114, 124, 2C3, basically any change of use in the property where there's no off-street parking provided or limited off-street parking provided, by code, they need an exemption or an exception from Plan Commission. So essentially, because this building was essentially vacant for the last year and a half or so, and now is being reactivated, technically by code, they need an exception for not having off-street parking. Well, if you've been by the site, it is, I think it's just under a half-acre site, but the front building where the retail center or the retail area is, and then behind it, there is a, basically, the indoor drive-through lumberyard. So basically, the entire site is covered by building. So there's no off-street parking on the site. There is parking on Dickinson, ample parking, I should add, on Dickinson Boulevard. I believe there's 45 spaces between Church and Mill Street, and most of the time that is empty. So as I've reviewed this and as I've worked with Chris and Christy from Columbus Nutrition, I don't see any issue with this, but I figured we should follow the rules and make sure that the exception was granted. This is one of the few items where the buck stops with the Plan Commission and they can grant the exception for this. I guess that's really all I had to say. I don't know if you have any questions for me or the applicant, or Chris, do you want to say a word about this or no?
I don't think I have anything to add. Thank you for adding us to the agenda.
Okay. So with that, I am looking, there's no discussion.
So I have a question they're going to rent out the main retail building, right?
I think they're renting out half of it.
Okay. So if the other buildings that are part of that complex or the sites get sold, reused, that generate extra parking demand, because right now there's plenty of space out there to park anywhere.
Correct.
But if those other sites on the other blocks, may get sold off, and then in the future, what happens if the demand for parking gets to be a problem in the neighborhood? What happens then?
Well, it really depends on how things get redeveloped over there. I mean, even in this site, for example, if some of the old lumberyard that is kind of behind the building, that some of that building back there really there isn't a lot to it, If that was removed for outdoor parking, the property owner could do that to address the issues. Really, that would be the only alternative, would be to find some location to provide off-street parking. That would be a great problem to have, because then that means everything's full up and that there's a lot of vibrancy in our downtown.
Yeah, I wouldn't anticipate that need for a number of years.
No, I would
Hypothetically asking the question is, we may grant this exception for parking, but the next, developments may not have that luxury, if they do generate traffic. And having the 45 spaces right nearby is probably just fine.
Yeah. The other thing that I would just add from the zoning administrator perspective, when I look at the requirements for our parking, it's really, it's just everything in our parking code assumes you're building a, 10-acre green space at the edge of our town. It's, there isn't a lot of consideration for, well, you know, the downtown's already been built, and, you know, what the parking requirements are, the exemptions are for like the downtown, because theoretically speaking, you know, the thing that triggered this was the fact that it was a big change of use. For the rest of the downtown, it's already been existing as most of the ground floor is either office, commercial. So usually when that gets reoccupied, that doesn't trigger the change of use like this technically does, or at least this did in my opinion as zoning administrator. So you're right, those are those issues, and as our downtown hopefully becomes a revitalized and a more popular destination, this is probably an issue that we'll have to be aware of.
And if anybody wants to develop in the area, those sites are ripe because they're pretty well open. There's not a lot of sites in that close to downtown where people would have the freedom to redevelop, rebuild, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Does Chris have an idea of a maximum or normal visits per day that they hope to get?
So we would expect to have 4 to 5 cars at a time maximum. There's not too much more than that ever, because people are going to be in and out pretty fluidly.
Okay. That sounds good. That's reasonable for the site. It's probably similar to what Caldwell experienced. So that should be fine.
That is actually a very good point. I haven't even thought of that angle, yes.
Yeah.
Though, I guess the one thing I should also add is my conversations with Chris and Christy was that usually their guests aren't there. It's not like they're there for hours at a time. It's usually
Right.
they're in there for anywhere from, you know, 15 minutes to a half hour at most. So, you know, 4 or 5, it's going to be turned over. Honestly, I would even wonder if the angle parking, if there's parking right in front of the store, I don't know how much is going to actually go into that angle parking, but I guess we'll see.
Yes, my only question was the approximate estimate of parking was just based on the type of business they have and number of customers.
Correct. It was based on that, their square footage and how many employees they have. So, the estimate was, of 10 was, as I'm figuring this, I always go conservative and go on the high side, just so you have an idea of what it is. But if they had a legitimate chance to add off-street parking, I probably would have asked a few more questions to dial that down to like the exact number and give you a more detailed. But when I looked at this, I'm like, well, there's nowhere for them to go. So I
Right.
mean, to me, it really kind of met what the intent of the code was.
And maybe a
so-
follow-up to that I was, and I'm trying to memorize what was down there off memory, but is there any ADA as a business requirement? Do they need to provide any sort of ADA parking or anything up to the building to allow for that business? And I don't know the rules of that, but kind of where I was thinking of just,
I know for a downtown business, recently we did provide an ADA stall on street. If that is a concern, that is something they could work with our public works and we could potentially take care of. I do know, I think their entrance, and I think pretty much their building will be ADA compliant, so that is something we can take into, and as that area becomes, you know, that maybe
More
has
developed.
more people and more development, that's something the city should be considering, yes.
and maybe it's adequate there now. Like I said, I'm speaking without
We
any memory
usually-
of like what's down there right now,
No,
but
typically for parking, I believe by code, like once, you have to have one stall per 20 spaces. So, you know, if there's
Mhm.
100,
Oh, that's true.
100
So-
stalls, you'd have to have 5, or you'd be required to have 5. So, being that really their demand is gonna be under 10, I mean, it would force, you know, the way I interpret it, it wouldn't require them to have
it's not
one,
over the
but
threshold. Yeah.
if they
No.
wanted to have an on-street one, I know we've worked with businesses in the past to provide that, to put the paint down and sign it.
And technically, if there's only the one, because it's like a certain ratio, how, like you have, I believe it's offhand 6 ADA stalls, one of those 6 must be van accessible. So if you only
Yes.
have one, it shall be a van accessible. So it's just not having, you know, be accessible, but it's also
Correct.
van portion, which really the only difference is the striping on the side where you can't park, and also there's a height requirement for van access underneath the wall,
Yep,
and the appropriate signage.
yep.
So I just like, don't want to be off topic, downtown, you know, if you throw a handicap stall, I question whether that's truly actually compliant in the first place, you know, because it's not a van accessible, you know, where, you know. So, you know, it might have to be looked at a little bit more, strictly than just calling the handicap spot.
Yeah. And the other option would be, and when we painted the stall, the other option we discussed was using the city-owned lots that are downtown. There's the one on the other side of Tequila's, and there's the 2 down on Water Street. Obviously, the one on the other side of Tequila's would be preferred to actually get, you know, those two blocks of downtown, and then most of downtown would be easiest to get to from that lot. So that is always something we can look at. So.
And I'm sorry, maybe I'm off topic with that, but then if you're talking, like, it'd be a van accessible at that lot, then to go for the business?
Yeah,
Because then there's also another question at play that you can have a handicap stall, have a handicap entrance, and then you have to have a handicap route, you know, that follows prescribed ADA, places. So if you have a stall here, and then you have a mountain, and you have the building here, and you can't get to said building.
well, there's not any mountains that I'm aware of in our downtown. No, your point is, yeah, I'm sorry, I shouldn't be so flip about that, but I'm just, you know, the lot was considered when we put the on-street stall, just because the question is, well, how do they get up to the curb then if it's on street and they have to go, you know, a couple hundred feet to get onto the curb ramp? Is it just then safer to have it at the city-owned lot where then you're at grade, you're already up on the sidewalk and you don't have to deal with, negotiate the curb ramp, so. It's something.
This is good discussion, but
Yeah,
is
you're-
this going to have any bearing on
No.
our decision here?
No,
Okay,
correct.
then we
Thank
need
you.
to leave it alone, and
Thank
we
you for.
you guys should, though, bring that up with Public Works, just as sort of more of a comprehensive parking plan. No,
Well, I
no,
agree with
that's
South
okay.
Essex.
If it's pertinent to this site, then we need to talk about it, but if it's not, then I think we need to keep moving. I'd like to ask Brad's question in a different way, maybe. How does an exception get rescinded if the need arises? Is that maybe what you were?
I wasn't asking about rescission, but rescinding it, but what would happen? And I think it's so far out hypothetically that I'm not concerned about.
Right, but I think it's good to understand how that would go. Is this revocable?
Not the way the code reads, not to my
Okay,
understanding.
so it's a first come, first serve exception.
I think as I've seen them, that is also the way it goes, yes.
Okay, just so we understand how that works. Okay. Any further discussion? Okay. I think all the points about how much is out there and your point about kind of eyeballing how much Caldwell used, you know, how much parking they used is a good one too. So, all right, hearing no more discussion, I'll entertain a motion, and this would be a motion to grant or deny the exemption, because this need not go to council.
Correct.
All right.
I'll make the motion to grant the exception for the parking.
I'll second.
All right, I have a motion and a second. Any further comment? Hearing none, all of those in favor signify by aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Great. Thank you. Okay. All right. Moving on to item 8C, we have another public hearing. This one is for something the city is requesting. Review the request of the City of Columbus for zoning map amendment from RD Rural Development District to P Public, Semi-Public Institutional and Recreational District for parcel number 11211-1190.OL2, otherwise known as the lift station next to
The playground at Enterpac
at
Park
Enterpac Park. Yes, thank you.
on Warner Street.
Yep. All right, I'd like to open this public hearing and ask Matthew to introduce it.
All right, with the public hearing opened, I will just walk you through this. So this was an interesting one that was given to me, probably a couple weeks ago. And I looked at it, and the parcel, the outlot to where the existing lift station sits is on a parcel that's zoned RD, which is rural development. And the setbacks for that district are 35 feet in the front and 35 feet in the rear. Well, you look at that site, and that site is tiny. So my first thought was, well, this might need a variance. And I'm like, this really isn't a good use of a variance. Like, this should be changed to something that's more fitting of the actual building. So after looking through the options and talking things over with basically the development team, it was ended up being recommended that, consider rezoning back to public. And I know a few administrators ago, they did a citywide rezoning and removed all the public zoning from the city, which I'm not really sure why they did that. But to me, that makes the most sense for this property. It did open one loophole, which is addressed by the item E on the agenda tonight, which we'll get to later. But so when you look at the public zoning, there is no setback requirement that is listed. There are no bulk regulations for like height, setbacks, et cetera. And it claims that you can do it by conditional use. Well, the problem with this one is that a utility substation like is proposed is actually permitted use under public zoning, which would make sense. So under E, we're going to have to approve the site plan just to basically memorialize what the setbacks are for that building. I've noticed the neighbors, I've received one comment to date, just asking what exactly is going on and how it's going to impact the playground. Once I answered that question, there was no concerns. It was just somebody who was getting more information. This is, to me, it's a fairly clear-cut rezoning. Also, I should note that the future land use map did show this area as public. So the rezoning would be consistent with the future land use map. And the proposed lift station, it's not the lift station, the proposed generator and structure to support the lift station would start construction. I believe they want to do it later this fall. So getting the approvals done now would kind of get them teed up for their approvals if there was any considerable questions. Any other questions for me? The plans that Rupert Milky developed are fairly straightforward. I did the safe space in the packet, just only put in floor plans, building elevations, and the site plan. and saved you some of the few pages of text. I guess if you needed to see the full set of plans, I can provide a copy. I have them right here at the desk. But as I said, I think this one's a fairly simple, as far as rezonings go.
Can you explain what this is for? Why is this needed beyond what's there right now?
Because if they just built it as it's zoned, technically, it does not meet the setbacks for that zoning district. So
What's the equipment for?
it's a generator, so the existing structure that's on that site, that's the lift station for the sewer utility. This is a generator that is basically gonna be a backup generator for the lift station. So if the power were ever to go out, this supports that lift station.
Oh, so it's a gas-run electric generator to run the lift station, okay.
Yes. So basically.
Because right now, if the electricity goes out, that doesn't work.
To my
The lift station
understanding,
wouldn't work,
yes.
okay.
So this
Thank
was a needed utility project,
So it's a
obviously
backup
it's-
generator to run the lift station
Yeah.
if the power goes out,
and
okay.
it's you got a 9 by 15 shed basically, or I shouldn't say shed, but you know what I mean, 9 by 15 structure.
Yeah.
That is basically gonna go, I think it's 20 feet from the existing structure that's out there, so.
Okay.
It's
So
not,
this won't be running all the time, only in emergencies,
that is my understanding.
okay. Yeah.
Probably monthly testing and emergencies, right? Monthly testing and emergencies, I'd imagine, probably for generator, but.
Okay, yeah. And since Uriah is down the hill, I think this is a
Keep the
Import-
sewage out of
import-
my basement
important
before
concern.
it gets to
That
yours.
the lift station
So,
continue to
yes.
work. I'm up the hill, so I'm
Yep,
fine.
yep, you're in good
I'm
shape.
good.
You know what they say about downhill.
Yes.
right.
You guys were just outside of the notice.
The notification zone,
Right,
yeah.
right. But I gotta look at this thing, so it's nice that the elevations are architecturally respectful.
Yeah.
It
it's
looks
not-
like they relatively match the existing one
Yeah.
in some way.
And the one thing that I think I noted in the staff report is, even though it doesn't meet the RD setbacks, it meets the existing nature of the area. It's not gonna be like 5 feet off the sidewalk. It's a good 30 feet back. The other thing that they could have also considered was go through and do a CSM, because the city owns 3 lots around there, and they could have just combined them all. But then they still wouldn't have met the front yard setback for the RD zoning, and the other issue with that was the other 2 parcels have a different zoning. The other 2 parcels are zoned for a park, and this one was zoned RD. So it's like, even if you did a CSM and combined them, you still had to do, correct. So it was like, well, it was one of those ones where it was just kind of wonky, and there was not a good way to do it. So this was the best way to do it in our opinion, so.
Well, the fronts of both buildings look to be flush, which will look correct.
Yeah,
Whatever the setback is, they'll look correct. It'll match the existing setback,
Yep,
which hasn't
that-
bothered anybody.
yeah, no, and that's what I meant by it's the same nature as in the rest of the,
Okay,
so.
good.
And the RD district is really meant for very large parcels before they, is it the same as rural holding?
It's rural development, it generally ends up being.
A holding
So
district, right?
If something was annexed into the city.
Yeah.
If it is not, at the time of annexation, if it was not declared a district, a zoning district, it is automatically given RD. So that's kind of the holding, and then it ends up being, you're right, a lot of the large lots kind of on the edge of town, it ends up being a lot of the agricultural use that's still within the city, is generally under this zoning, so, but it's kind of a holding zoning, if you will, as you
Yeah,
said.
I'm shocked that this is RD even today. It seems like it's sort of an overlooked leftover from when there wasn't the development
Yeah.
out there, so.
It was one of those ones where I looked at the site plan, and I looked at the zoning, and I'm like, why, I was shocked too, I'll just put it that way.
Okay, so this proposed zoning has no specified setback, but we we implicitly approve the setback by addressing the site plan in the next?
Yeah.
Is that how that
I'll-
works?
I'll get into that when we get
Okay.
into E and approve the site plan for this.
Okay,
So when you approve the site plan for them to build where they put on the plans, I mean, that's what you're approving. And that's how we're gonna establish the setbacks for this. And then if they wanna come in and build another lift station or a bigger lift station, that probably would have to be reviewed as well and have some sort of approval at Plan Commission and Council, just to make sure it's meeting. And I can see why they don't put setbacks for the public zoning, because if this building was zoned public, well, we'd want it to conform with the surrounding, properties, and when you're in the downtown area, there are 0 lot line setbacks, you could build right out. So, different parts of town, it's gonna be a different type of building depending on what you're doing. So for public buildings, it does give some flexibility, but I still think there has to be some way to memorialize and approve what you're doing.
Right, this would be inappropriate if it were a much, much larger substation and they put it on the sidewalk in the residential area.
Oh, yeah.
That would not
Correct.
work.
Oh, yeah.
This is acceptable.
Yeah.
They're small, it's 30 feet roughly, whatever it is. So that's more reasonable.
Mhm.
Yeah, so there should be some way to catch that, so you just can't put anything up that's sensitive to the site.
Yeah.
other comments? Okay. I'll open up to the public. I'll ask if there's any members of the public that wish to make comment. For a second time, are there any members of the public that wish to make comment? For the third and final time, are there any members of the public that wish to make comment? Hearing none, I will close the public hearing for the zoning map amendment from RD to P. Okay. That moves us into deliberation, review of the site plan and recommendation, correct?
No,
What did I miss?
you said review the site plan, that's E. It's, you close the public hearing, deliberate, and make recommendation regarding the rezoning. and then-
Gotcha.
Then we move into E.
Gotcha, all right. I squished them together, sorry
Yeah,
about that.
no, I think
Okay.
they need to be two separate
Yep,
motions.
deliberate and make recommendation, so any further comment or deliberation apart from what we've had? In which case I'll entertain a motion to recommend to council. I always say entertain, but there's barely any entertainment here.
I'll move to recommend to council.
Thank you.
I'll second that.
I have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor signify by aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Okay,
Katie went to her phone, I got it.
yeah.
Just wondering who was calling in.
I got kicked out.
Oh,
Oh.
did you?
I think she tried to call me first.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Failed
Okay.
somebody. That's okay.
How,
I'm back.
All right, you're back and we're putting you down for a yes vote on that?
That's correct.
Excellent. Motion passes. So, all right. Now we can move on to the site plan review, correct?
yes.
All right, so this site plan review is in order to establish setbacks, as it were, for the
Yeah, so.
proposed building?
This was essentially the workaround that I came up with as the zoning administrator. Because when you look at our municipal code, it assumes that everything for the that is zoned institutional or public is a conditional use. And this wasn't the case. So it basically says that the conditional use process will establish what the setbacks are for anything zoned public. So because that is the case, and it's a permitted use, I felt we needed some sort of formal way to approve the setbacks and the site plan for what is being built on this property. So my recommendation is essentially, you don't have to go through the conditional use process, but you're essentially treating it the same, and we're basically approving the site plan. So once you make a recommendation, council will go ahead and approve the site plan. And that way we have some sort of record of what was allowed to be built there, rather than just saying, oh yeah, it looks good, just go do it. So, that was my, intention behind this. As you can see, when you look at the site plan, it is, just about 30 feet from the parcel line, 15 feet from the rear. It is more than 10 feet from the other structure that's out there. Generally speaking, when we have accessory structures or parcels with multiple structures, we do try to require them to be 10 feet away, so it meets that. The one area where it didn't, it struggled to meet anything that was in our code was the 15 feet from the rear property line, which, usually for a lot of the zoning codes, it's usually about 20 to 25 feet. So, and if it stayed RD, it was supposed to be 35 feet. There was no physical way you could actually put that on that parcel. Being that the city owns the parcel behind it and will always own the parcel behind that, or I shouldn't say always, but I anticipate that they would always own the parcel behind that. The rear setback really is not, it's kind of inconsequential to this. It ultimately ends up not mattering. So, but as I said, there has to be some sort of way to show that the setbacks for this project were approved. And that's what I recommended, just having a simple approval of the site plan. So that's why I brought it to Planning Commission to make a recommendation to council. And then council can ultimately approve the rezoning and then ultimately approve the site plan as proposed.
Any discussion on that? Seems like it was kind of part and parcel of our prior discussion, but if there's any comments, we'll take them. Otherwise, I think we can head toward somebody making a motion to recommend.
I'll motion to make the recommendation to Common Council for approval of site plan.
I'll second that.
Who's that? I heard Brad first. All right, I've got a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor of recommendation to approve signify by aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None. Passes. Great. Okay. Last item under new business is review the final draft chapters of the comprehensive plan. And then we can, beyond that, we can have our discussion of the site plan ordinance. So, Matthew, what do you have for us for the comp plan?
So tonight, we'll talk about chapter 3 and 4 of the comprehensive plan, housing and, utilities and community facilities. I almost, chapter 2 is nearly finished, but I'm still awaiting a little bit more information. So, we'll have to do one more chapter at the next meeting. Just to follow up, I have put the first chapter out on the website, so it is out there for review. Pretty soon here, once the next couple chapters start going up, I've been talking with, I need to work with Lisa to get some more information out on Facebook and start getting the word out there and getting comments rolling in. This has been reviewed at this committee at previous meetings. Really, I'm going to kind of go through this tonight. Really, the big items for discussion and the things that we need to start thinking about are goals, objectives, and policies. I've started to fill in some of these categories based off of the feedback we got during the Roadmap 2050, and then also looking at our previous comp plans and just looking and kind of deciphering whether or not those things are still critical or still applicable to things that are going on now. And the other thing that really is informing me as I'm making some of these decisions is, participation at the council level too, and for the most part, going and listening in on council meetings and some of the topics that are right now that seem to be pretty important. So with that, I'm just going to go through that. I'm not going to try to go word for word. But I'm just going to hit somewhat the high notes and then get into the goals, objectives, and policies, if that is okay. Starting with utilities and community facilities is exactly what it sounds like. Essentially, it's a chapter that's going to inventory basically, all our, sanitary sewer, storm sewer, water, electricity, cable, and then also looking at things like parks and other community facilities. So with that, I'll just go through. There's a section on the sanitary sewer system. I got some fun facts and data from John Namer, who was good enough to provide me with some data. Also, just want to note that I think it's important that since I've been here, when they go out and do their annual CMAR, which is Compliance Maintenance Annual Report, they've always gotten excellent grades. I think basically perfect grades the last 2 years. So we have a very well-run wastewater treatment facility. Going through stormwater management now. This is one where I talk a little bit about the importance, and there's some kind of standard language, and I talk a little bit about our codes, but this is one where it's becoming increasingly important, and I know this has been discussed in concept at the council level, and I think there's going to be more details coming to the council soon, but this is one that's increasingly important, especially when you look at what happened on June 10th in our community. The one thing I would share is no matter what we do for stormwater, we probably will never be able to handle 4 inches of rain in a 2-hour period or 3-hour period. It's going to be nearly impossible to have that effect, but it's increasingly becoming apparent, especially with kind of changes with weather and how it seems some of these big storms are happening more frequently. It's something that we definitely need to be cognizant of. And that will be reflected later on in the goals, objectives, and policies. Water, this is just much like much like the sanitary sewer, just an overview on our system, and also talking about solid waste and recycling, and then some information on basically cell phone and cable providers and phone providers in town under telecommunications. Power plant and electric just gives an overview of the electric provider that is in town. Obviously, everybody knows most of it comes from Water and Light, but there are a few others that I was able to find under the Public Service Commission's. They have a little database out there that gives you who provides electricity in your community. So one of the bigger ones in the section was parks. So after our last meeting, there was a lot of discussion on, well, how many acres of parks do we have and how many are in the floodplain? So I prepared some tables and graphs to kind of update this section. So the bullet points here are parks that we have, and I even included the newest park, which hasn't really been finished yet, Butterfly Trails Volunteer Park. So on here, I have a general I have an idea of what the acreage is. A lot of this information was done in our outdoor rec plan that was, from what I can tell, the outdoor rec plan wasn't adopted, but there was a draft completed in 2010-ish. So I had a draft of that to work off of. And as you'll see later on, I'm going to recommend that we actually adopt an outdoor recreation plan because there's some benefit that comes to that. So one of the things that I researched was, well, how many acres should we be providing, right? How much parkland should we have for our population? And the National Recreation and Park Association basically recommends 10 acres per 1,000 people. So when you look at us, and this is just the city-owned parks. This isn't getting into what the school district owns. This isn't getting into, yes, we also own 70-acre golf course, but technically that golf course it's open to the public to golf, but you have to pay a fee. It's not like I can just walk on there and take my dog out there, So I didn't specifically include it in this analysis. But when you look at the parks that we have and the population we have, we're roughly 12 acres, just over 12 acres per 1,000 people. So we exceed the recommended national and actually the average. I think the average was 9.9 acres, according to the field report that I found from the NRPA. So the other thing that I thought was kind of useful was, so this isn't exact. It's not like it's a survey, but using GIS, there are tools that we have in place that you can measure, basically create a polygon to measure how big things are. So what I did was I measured the amount of floodplain on our parks, and 52 acres of the 65 acres are floodplain, which is just under 80%, which, that tends to be the trend. A lot of times parklands are, when somebody is building a subdivision or somebody's donating land to the city, generally that less desirable land is turned into some sort of like, well, we can't build here, so why don't you guys put a park here? And that tends to be what happens. So as I said, the Plan Commission, when this was reviewed previously, was curious what that number was. It'd be nice if our parkland was, wasn't in the floodplain and we could use it more often, but it's just kind of the nature of the beast with how parkland has been dedicated in the past. I'll just leave it at that. So figure 3.1 kind of shows the calculations that I just talked. Also, within Fireman's Park, one of the big things that we have is the aquatic center. So it's part of that 65 acres, but I took some important facts and figures from our website that we have on the aquatic center. I think that's an important thing to note when you're talking about parks. And maybe I should call this section Parks and Recreation, or just Recreation. And then the other thing I noted here there's two things I noted. One is the schools have open space, green space, playground equipment that are not the cities. They are the school districts, but they are generally open to the public, and you can go and play on them when school's not in session. So that ends up being extra park space that we have that's not city controlled, that we need to I'm taking into consideration. The other thing to note under recreation is that we do have two golf courses. They are both public golf courses in the fact that anybody who wants to pay the greens fees can pay them and go out and enjoy the golf course or lose their golf balls or whatever. So those are definitely recreational opportunities that we have here in town. The next, moving on, is one of the other things is cemeteries. And this is one of the more statutorial requirement things that we have to include under the section, is just talking about cemeteries. We do have the cemetery, the Hillside and St. Jerome's are basically adjacent to each other off of Lewis Street, kind of on the northeast side of town out there. Talking a little bit about healthcare. Prairie Ridge Hospital obviously is in town. We have a number of clinics as well. Talking childcare facilities. We have 8 licensed childcare facilities in town. That's according to the state licensing agency that tracks that data. A little bit about the police and emergency services, talking about our library, and then getting into schools, just talking briefly about the school district, obviously elementary school, the Discovery, St. Jerome's, Discovery Charter School, St. Jerome's, middle school, high school, talking about the amount of students. And then we get into city facilities, talking City Hall, DPW, Community Center, and Senior Center. So with that, this is where, and you'll note that for each section, like I left an extra number. That's because if there's extra things that we want to add, that's kind of the point of having this. I don't want this to be goals, objectives, and policies. At a certain level, council needs to review all this and kind of give their input as well. But being that you are residents of the city, and please bring up any goals, objectives, policies that you think we should consider. Keep in mind, goals are more general, and then objectives are basically on the spectrum of things. You're going from something that is more aspirational and more vague, if you will, to something that's a little more narrowly defined, to something that is basically an action item that would help achieve the goals and objectives. That makes sense when you're funneling through the goals, objectives, and policies. So, and as I said, I've looked through our comp plan, and anything that seemed to still make sense from that, I've moved it forward into this plan. I've looked at the feedback we got during the roadmap process, incorporated that, council feedback, and that's kind of where we're at. So with that, I'll just roll through these, and if there's any questions, feel free to interrupt me at any time. So the first goal was maintain and improve city facilities and that should say services. This was kind of a generic goal that was in the last comp plan. It still seems like something we should be striving to do. Obviously we want to maintain our facilities and make sure our services are adequate for our citizens. So provide safe, reliable, cost-effective water, electric, sewer, and stormwater facilities. I think that's obviously, the utility is a key function to our municipal government. Support high-quality educational opportunities for all residents. So whether that's, making sure we're working with the school or working with the library or working with our tech college that represents us, those sort of items. Provide adequate recreational facilities to enhance health and quality of life for our residents. Support development of city facilities that is identified in our roadmap plan, which is going to be adopted later this year. I thought that was this was the section where the two plans kind of meet. And then, obviously, we want to minimize the impact of flooding on city parks and facilities. So, as I said, 80% of our parkland's flooded. Our DPW facility is in the floodplain. I think we want to make sure we're minimizing that to the maximum extent possible. And objective, and as I said, this is something that I think we'll be hearing some more ideas on later, but create a stormwater utility for dedicated funding source for stormwater infrastructure. Right now, the city really, those that, staff that works on this on a daily basis knows stormwater is a huge need, but there is not a dedicated funding source for it. And it creates a lot of problems because when it comes to doing a road project or stormwater, a big stormwater project, I think a lot of times, I don't want to say it's easier, but I think people more immediately see the benefit. Oh, the road looks nicer. And a lot of times it's like, well, making the stormwater so it moves through an area better, or like it should. Unless it rains really hard, people don't understand what it is compared to saying, oh, I see new pavement. So that's something that we've been working on, I think internally, and something that I think there will be more discussion of, but I still think it's something that the city should strive to have is, and whether that's how that happens, whether that's more grant funding or what have you, I think that's something that needs to be addressed. Ensure that the city of Columbus government operates in the most effective and efficient manner possible. Ensure utilities and public facilities in Columbus are upgraded and maintained to meet the balance between cost and level of service desired by our residents and businesses. Identify how city facility and utility projects that are eligible for state and federal grant programs. Kind of mentioned that earlier. Getting grants is something that I think, the Hibbard Street project that we're just kicked off. I mean, getting a $450,000 grant for the LRIP program goes a long way to helping our budget. And the more of those grants we can get, it helps because then we can put it into the next project, or do something bigger and better with that money, essentially. So. Objective, kind of as we said what the national objective was, is, making sure there's 10 acres for every 1,000 of park space, or 1,000 new residents. So when you look at the housing data, I have the average household size for owner occupied, and I have an average household size for a renter. And so depending on, what projects we have moving forward, it'll be very easy to say, all right, well, you're putting 40 lots in, and 40 times 2.5, is, it's 100. So that hits on, that's a good example I came up with. But, under that scenario, you'd be like, well, maybe we need to find an acre of park space if we want to stay at the 10 per 1,000. And those are things to all consider when we have the subdivision application. And then I did put.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
I was just wondering, because I know, just curiosity, and it's fine if you did include or didn't, but as far as the park space, I know that the school has their football fields and things like that, and that is actually city-owned property that is lent to the school district. Is that included in that total? Just out of curiosity?
Yes, that was, yes. So that when you go at Fireman's Park, and I have it as 30-some acres, that includes the football field and, that parcel.
And then you also said that you included the part that isn't finished yet, but obviously is a plan in progress, so. And do you know I don't know how big that Butterfly Garden
It's about,
volunteer park is.
Well, see, the tricky part is when I estimated its size, and I think I put in here, it was like 5 acres. You know, because right now, well, as you know, Katie, right now, really the only thing that's been conceptually approved is, you know, there's about an acre for the butterfly garden. And there's
Right.
some other plantings that the Oddfellows are gonna get me some more information on here in the near future. And long-term, there might be, well, long-term, maybe meaning in 2 years, but I mean, right now, that's the focus. There's also plans to have a river walk down there along the crawfish, kind of behind the wastewater treatment plant. I know it doesn't sound glorious, but actually, if you've been back there, it's actually quite peaceful.
I'm excited about it.
Yeah, so, one thing I didn't include in that 5 acres is I didn't do like a linear measurement of the park space along the river. And so that isn't technically included, in that,
So we may be a little closer to, instead of over that national average.
oh yeah, yeah, I mean, if I wanted to, if I had the time to like go through and like have it like be really anal retentive with my measurements, I'm sure we're more like 13 or 14. And then if you include what's at the schools, it's probably more than that. So,
And I don't know if like any of the private schools or those like playgrounds able to be used publicly. I have no idea. But if you wanted to be inclusive of them, I don't know. Is that-
I could,
I know public versus private, I'm not sure all the rules there.
sorry, no, St. Jerome's, I don't think if you go down there, I don't think they have like, have it fenced off.
Right.
And I can't imagine
I
if,
don't think Zion is either.
I can't imagine if kids went out there and played in the middle of summer, like they're out there shooting kids off their property. I doubt that's the case. So, I mean, you're right, that's another area that basically acts as parkland where people can go and, you know, even in the green space, there's things you can do, whether you're flying a kite or doing whatever, running around playing football or, you know, what have you. That I think when I started looking at it, even though there is a large chunk of our land that is, you know, in the floodplain, which really the one that gets hit the most is Kiwanis. I mean, that's the one where, you know, it just seems, as the Second Ward Creek goes through that park, it just seems to collect water. And if we have a bad year, you know, it's hard to use those baseball fields.
Maintain those fields, yeah.
Yeah, and I know last summer, like, Zach was having trouble, DPW, you know, being able to go out there and mow because it was so wet. This year has been different, thankfully, but, you know,
Alright,
sorry.
I just said thanks for answering my question.
Oh, sorry, I thought I cut you off.
No, that's okay.
You know, one thing I would note is as, you know, there are stormwater improvements made, you know, it will have an effect on the, you know, the parks and some of the public areas throughout town. Just anecdotally, you know, down at Kestrel Ridge, the new owners of the golf course have made substantial improvements to the drainage out there. And it's, I've heard from a few neighbors that have noticed that it's really improved the drainage through there. So, I mean, if you do it right, I mean, it can have an impact on an area. So, all right, policies. One thing, first thing is comprehensive outdoor rec plan will be updated every 5 years. The big benefit to that is once we have it done and it's adopted and it's approved by DNR, then we're eligible for all sorts of programs. So I think in the past, which I don't have any data or any proof of this, is that we've submitted projects to the county for their outdoor rec plan. Otherwise, we're technically not covered by anybody's outdoor rec plan, which having it makes us more competitive when we apply for grants. It would be, in my opinion, that we do it. And it's one of those things where once it's written, then every 5 years, it's a fairly simple update. And quite frankly, the version I have is a Word document, and it's something that I think, once the comp plan gets done, I think I can staff and I can do it relatively quickly, because then it's just updating it and updating the numbers and making sure the text makes sense. But yeah, that's something that I think is something we should be doing moving forward, because it opens up some opportunities. The other thing is having a 5-year capital improvement program. Right now, we don't really do have a 5-year capital improvement program for the city. I know that's been, well, I'll just say it, for when we did the Hibbard Street project, that was a little controversial, because residents felt like, well, they didn't know that this was coming, so they were kind of surprised, and I think that would help. But the other thing that it would help from staff's point of view is, if we had projects queued up that were identified, it would help us identify potential grant sources for projects. An example, I don't know if we're going to get the grant yet, but in January, I applied for the Transportation Alternatives Program grant through DOT. It's federal funds that are administered through DOT. And we applied for an MLS grant for some bike and pedestrian trails throughout town. Well, because we did the MLS grant, we kind of had this project that was already queued up, and I looked at it and I'm like, oh, this would fit perfectly here. So I submitted it, and I think we have a good chance of getting it, but that's one of those, getting back to, if these projects were in a capital improvement program, and staff could look and say, oh, well, maybe we should have this. There's no guarantee we're going to get the grants, but having that outline will give us a better chance to apply for them, because it's easier to apply for them when you know what's coming, rather than, like, yes.
You know, would encourage that as well, Matt, because some of the cycles for those grant programs are long. I mean, years long sometimes. So if you want to build it next year, you're too late, because you had to apply a year earlier, or sometimes they're a couple years long. But the other thing is that you may not get, you likely would not get a grant. The odds are 10%, 40%, whatever it is for some of these programs. But you can apply the next year and the next year. So if you have some things that are set out that can wait 5 years, you can apply multiple times through several cycles, and you may then hit and get it. If we were trying to do Hibbard and had to wait 10 more years, that would be bad, because it's in such bad shape. But if they planned that 10 years ago, and waited and tried every cycle for these grant programs, you had a much better chance of getting the money. And I say it's free money, but it is a lot of money. It's very significant. Any portion helps our budget. So if they are queued up 5 years ahead, even 10 years ahead, you can try to get into those grant cycles and maybe be successful more often.
And the other thing I would add is, if we had also what you'd call advanceables, like if you had something that may not be in your 5-year plan, but if it was more competitive in a grant program, and they said, well, we can give you half the money for this project or a quarter of the money, it's like, all right, well, it gives some flexibility, I think, for staff, and I think it would help, especially for the grant. And then, as I said, for the Hibbard example, it would help residents kind of know what to expect with where projects are coming in. Yeah. I know budgets change and priorities change and council members change, so there's always going to be change. Nothing's ever going to be etched in stone, but at least it gives us, a good idea of what to expect in the near future.
Yeah, and the other advantage of those is you do get some preference if the planning or the project is shovel-ready, versus if you're just hypothetically starting and you don't know if you have consensus from the county and the city and the parks and all those other people. But if you have that and it's ready and you've got plans to go, that definitely moves you up in the priority list of, yep, this is a serious project, so that would get funded. So that certainly helps too if we're ready ahead of time.
All right.
Matt,
Yep.
if I could chime in for a second. So on the policies, number 2, in the city will develop the 5-year capital improvement program. I'm a huge advocate for that, as I did hear a lot from the Timber Street residents and other residents alike. But I have not been through this entire, like, every chapter of this, and this chapter being chapter 3, utility and community facilities. And I understand how the capital improvement plan, or how establishing a capital improvement plan would work towards this particular, for building maintenance and things like that. But will that also then be listed, I guess, under like transportation and
Yes.
capital projects, and how it pertains to transportation, whether it be roads, sidewalks, other infrastructure?
No, it absolutely would. And when we get to the executive summary for this document, the things that kind of you'll notice in multiple elements that are deemed important, that will be, basically identified in the executive summary are, these are some of our key recommendations or key policies that we think the city needs to, consider. Just likewise for stormwater, when we start talking about, natural resources and waterways and flooding in chapter 2, talking about stormwater utilities and needing a stormwater utility to help mitigate flooding that would be another one that's probably going to cross
Right.
chapters. So, yeah, I totally anticipate that you'll want to see a capital improvement plan, in the transportation section as well. And maybe others, depending on what some of the goals are. But, I mean, definitely those two for sure, yes.
Right. And I just wanted to also say that I'm very happy about number 3. That would make me very happy to require all new residential developments dedicate land for public parks. But I guess I was just wondering, as far as, or pay a fee in lieu of land dedication, would that fee then feed into park maintenance, or where would that be?
No, unfortunately, that wouldn't be for maintenance. I mean, that would be, and I was actually talking with Kyle about this, our city administrator, and
Yeah.
I may be mistaken on how easy it is to incorporate impact fees. I mean, I still think it's something we need to consider. But, as I was thinking this out in my head, was that, in the example I gave earlier, if it was a 40-lot subdivision and the average household size for a single-family house is 2.5 people and it's 100 new people, we would say, new developer, you either provide 1 acre of parkland or you pay us, whatever we establish as the going rate for a lot,
Okay.
to be used for park space that, we can buy in the future. But there's some limitations on that after chatting with Kyle, and I guess I'm not, I still have more to learn on that. So it's,
Okay.
Looks like you could have 3 and approve 4. Allow them to pay and not have a park space for them. You might not be within a half mile of a park.
well, yeah.
Just say I'm right.
What did Jason say? I'm sorry, I couldn't hear very well.
Just might be hard to make sure that we hit number 4 if we give all these opt-outs in number 3, to be within a half mile walking distance of a city-owned park.
Right. Especially with the, I guess, currently at least, the lack of availability of property for sale.
Yeah.
Those fees in lieu are often not at the discretion of the developer, they're at the discretion of the city. So you can leverage it in the correct way, right? For instance, you were talking about a 40-lot subdivision. Well, what if you have a 6-lot subdivision? You'd rather not, have them dedicate, whatever it is, 0.12 acres of park. You'd rather maybe take a fee, be able to purchase something that's, a little larger after aggregating some funds in
Yeah.
an area where it's more amenable to more residents. But anyway, that's how that generally works.
Well, you're right, it gives flexibility, but
I agree.
it's something that we haven't done in the past, and I believe it's something that we'd have to have, before we can start enforcing them and having them, we would have to have some sort of study done. And it could be something that I could do or staff could do. It'd have to be something like Ellers, a financial kind of analyst look at it. And that has to be approved, I think, by statute. So, and that's why this was already typed, and then he told me about it. I was like, ooh, well, maybe, I'm like, well, yeah. So I'm glad you brought that up, because it reminded me that it might not be as easy as I put out in this document.
To that point, it might look like something like, if it is only a community of, or a very small subdivision, maybe 6, 7 houses, or whatever the case may be, a prorated amount of basically like a fee, or I guess almost a donation,
Mhm.
to the city to provide park space for those extra residents.
Yeah. But, I mean.
Maybe there's a minimum.
Yeah.
or,
So, the other thing, I guess, now that I'm thinking about it, to get to the maintenance, I mean, theoretically speaking, you'd be using, the impact fee would be to provide park space for the new population, basically, to make sure we stay above that goal that we have of 10 per thousand. And really, the new value you're gonna be getting from the homes, when the homes are built, when the 40 lots are developed, that would add to our general fund, and theoretically speaking, then the new funds for the general fund would help for the maintenance. I mean, in theory, that's how that would, in theory, that's how it should work, but I'm not sure it would be that perfect.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Ensure residents are within a half mile of walking distance of a city-owned park. Put half mile ends up being, for the average walker, about 10 minutes. Going 3 miles an hour. If you're a fairly slow walker, I think that's a fair measurement. Honestly, when you look at, now that we have the park or Interpack Park on Warner Street, or, you're right, I'll have to look at what it's officially not called, but now that, because the west side of the city there didn't really have anything that was terribly close that I can think of, but the other parts of the city, the one thing that's hard is when you say half mile walking distance, because, there's some areas that are close to parks, but they're not really walkable, Now that there's something down on River Road, there was, to my knowledge, or now that there will be something down on River Road, there wasn't anything down there before, and they might have been, as the crow flies, a half mile from Kiwanis Park, but there isn't a way to actually cut through the backyards and get over there. So, geographically speaking, I think, the way the parks are laid out in the city, I think it actually provides park space for every nook and cranny of the city. The only thing I can think of that might be the exception is Lewis Street across from the cemetery up on that kind of north east side of the city. There's really nothing that comes to mind that's out there that serves those folks, but that's something that an outdoor rec plan could certainly address. Support school district for planning of either new or upgraded facilities as needed. I put that in there. Roadmap 2050, when the citizen engagement team went out, we heard overwhelming support for new school facilities. And when the school went out and did their referendum, they heard the same thing. They did a survey before they went to referendum. They heard the same thing, and then when they went to referendum, it really showed that there's a support for new school facilities. I have a feeling that sooner or later this probably will be another issue, and I think it's something that we even as the city, when we were going through the comp plan and the roadmap process, we slowed things down a little bit because we wanted to see what was going to happen with the schools, because we heard that feedback and we saw that it was important. Obviously continue to support efforts for the library system and providing excellent service from the library. And then I put as a policy here, construct new facilities within the time frame identified by the Roadmap 2050 plan. One of the things that I'll just say is, I know nothing's adopted yet with that, and there's probably still going to be a little bit of shifting going on with when things occur. And to that extent, even after the plan is adopted, I expect there will be shifting because, things change over time and priorities shift. But what the plan really shows is a way to get these newer facilities built over the next 30 years in a way that, we can, theoretically afford it, and how you space them out so we can afford it. The plan also assumed all new facilities, which I don't think will always necessarily be the case. I mean, I think as opportunities arise, you might be able to find buildings that you could actually repurpose that serves our needs for a long period of time. So I guess what I'm trying to say is all options are on the table, but we still have a framework to work off of. So I guess with that, as I said, I left it blank at the end of every category. Is there anything you think I missed when you're talking utilities and community facilities? And I know I'm probably putting that in a spot because you only had a couple days to review this. But as I said, this will go on the web tonight. I'm going to put this out on the website for public comment. As we're going through this, this will not be a final draft until October. So you will still have ample time to incorporate this and incorporate your comments into this if you see fit. And we're still taking comments, so if somebody comes up with a really good idea to incorporate into our plan, we'll consider it. So any questions on this?
Just maybe another goal or objective, Matt, again, highlight the 4.0 rating for the CMAR grading we've received, and just on the water treatment
As an objective,
facility.
or are you talking as a policy? Because it's not like that's a grade we get from, I don't even know what state agency it is that gives it, but that's what we get from them. So I guess if I'd put a policy in there, it'd be more generic of maintain excellent grades or whatever for CMAR. That makes sense, because I don't want to set John up to fail or anybody else up to fail,
Not
because
perfect, but
something happens that's out of their control. Not that they would get vindictive, it's the comp plan, but you know what I mean.
it was more of a goal to
Yeah.
maintain that, but just
Okay.
something to highlight, right? I mean, we've had a good record there. It's
Okay.
continuing that.
And I just wanted to chime in and just say that, as far as the objectives, I was really excited to use stormwater utility, as a actual objective. You brought up the June 10th scenario, and I know that the city has just recently, last summer, made some, improvements to dredging the creek, throughout Fireman's Park for stormwater, movement through there. So just continuing on that project, and really, I think having a stormwater utility would just be so much better a solution than just every few years trying to decide on a project. Because as you know, like council changes and even city staff changes, and you may not realize how big of an impact, especially on most cities, but especially our city, that stormwater has. So I just was happy that you put that as an objective on there.
Oh. Well, as I said, it's, staff level, we know it's a huge issue. I mean, it takes up, when we meet for development team or when I meet with other staff, it comes up frequently, not just the June 10th, but just, I mean, issues that we have out there with it. There's issues on our system that need to be addressed, and they're not gonna go away until we have funds to address a lot of these, so. And I think as communities have evolved over time, I think stormwater has become a more critical component to things than it was, let's say, 20, 25 years ago. I mean, it just is, so.
Right.
And not that it wasn't important
It's
then.
a little bit more difficult to achieve a stormwater
Yeah.
utility, however,
Yeah.
but yeah, I was just happy that you put that on there, just because I think that what I meant by when council changes and when city staff changes, you know, I think it's important for most communities to have a stormwater utility, but especially for this one and the impact that we tend to have. And when you have that kind of changeover, you know, people join council or, you know, city staff for a multitude of reasons but may not realize, what the, I guess, impact is on that. And then, you know, are in charge of the budget and realizing how sort of tight things are year to year, and then, you know, not being as consistent with the funding for stormwater as I would like to do. So that's that.
Okay. And that, there's a possibility that there might probably be a few more stormwater-related things that gets beefed up in there too, so. But as I said, please review, send me any comments, or any things that you think we need to address. With that, there is one more chapter that I'd like to get through before we get to the ordinance. So, I will just kick it off. Katie, I sent this via email. It's the housing, chapter 4.
Yeah, I've got that.
Okay, so, much like I did, I'm gonna try to breeze through some of the document. I know this has already been reviewed at a certain level at Plan Commission. Some of you have reviewed it, maybe not all of you. First, I give a little overview of the comp plan and how it related to housing. Looking at different programs that are available. One of the things that I should add is that as I'm compiling programs, I'm trying to keep them in a centralized location. So, you know, when we have a potential project coming to me, I can kind of say, oh, I'll go see what we have out there, what kind of programs are out there, because there's just a lot of different programs that are out there. And, you know, I'm not an expert in housing. I'm not an expert in some of these fields, but if I know where the programs are, I can sometimes link potential projects to hopefully some funding to help get things done. So being that resource of knowing where things are at is what I'm striving to achieve here. So for this one's a lot like the demographic section where there's a lot of tables. So really, I'm going to go through and just talk about the tables. And I already see one typo. One thing to note is these tables were all updated recently because I have a new year of ACS data to work off of. ACS is the American Community Survey. And so when it says 2018, it really means it's a sample from 2014 to 2018. So basically the census got rid of the long form that they would do every 10 years, and now they do the American Community Survey every year. So it gives them more current data, but it's a rolling average over a 5-year period. So basically the 5-year period gives them a large enough sample size to deduct and give us estimates for Columbus. That being said, there is a margin of error in their data, so if some of the data looks weird, it's not perfect, but it's the best we have. So one thing to note, table 4.1, from 2000 to 2018, we had a 24.1% change in growth in new housing units, which did outpace the county and the state as far as percentage goes, which was a good sign. Table 4.2 is always an interesting table when you're doing a comp plan, just looking at when the housing units were built by year. This is census data has it. And it's no shocker that 35% of our houses were built before 1939. And when you compare that to the county and the state, it's a much higher percentage than the county and the state. We are in I'll say, a well-established community. And we do have older homes that are in our community. But you can kind of see the breakdown. Really, breaking down by year, you can see the years where we've experienced the most growth was 60s and 70s. We had a lot of growth, and then also in the 2009 phase, I should say, there was a lot of growth in our community. Going on to, which should say table 4.3, looking at the number of units by structure. No surprise when you look at it. So there's one unit detached and one unit attached, and I put in the narrative basically what the definition from the Census Bureau is on that. Essentially, if you have a side-by-side condo type of thing where it's like a duplex and you're side-by-side, they consider that a one unit attached. So it's, you share a wall with the neighbor, so it's attached. But I mean, especially kind of in our west side of the community, there's a lot of development where it is kind of a side-by-side condo kind of feel. In fact, I think we approved a conditional use permit for a zero lot line for one of those condos not too long ago. So you'll see that. The one thing that was interesting when you looked at the data, so when you look at the number of one units, it's, what did they say it was, 66.5% were single family, and then the other was, obviously, my math is good, 33.5%, which is slightly different than when you look at the county or the state. The county is predominantly single family. I mean, there's very few other types of units that are 2 units or more. And the state, we're closer to the state, but it's kind of interesting to see that when you look at this table, the breakdown of units, but then later on, when you look at the housing starts, we haven't had a lot of multifamily starts over the last 15 years. So, well, actually, it's the next table. So this was compiled from, so GEC, who's our building inspector, gives us monthly reports that has data that I've basically taken out of and put into this document. And then also, the 2009 comp plan had housing starts, or single-family homes built, so I borrowed that data and put it in this table, so we have going back to 2004. GEC started as our inspector in like 2008 or 9, so this is the best table, best data that I have. As you can see, we had 213 units total built from 2004 to 2020, and that is 12.5 single-family homes built a year. And then on average, and I may not have changed that average or it's probably rounded up. So 44 units over the 16-year period for multifamily. One of the things to note about multifamily, a lot of this has been either quadplexes or duplexes. There hasn't been a big multifamily development built in a while. When you look at it, single-family homes are probably going to be somewhat steady. Multifamily is going to be, if you have a big multifamily project coming in a year, it's like, oh, we did 80 that year, so it's not going to be nearly as neat as single-family. I think single-family, a large part depends on the demand. I mean, when you look at the houses we built in 17 and 18, 23 houses a year, we had supply. Right now, we don't have supply. And that's why we've only had 4. And the 4 that have been built are technically side-by-side condos that are down on River Road. They're going up right now. So it's one of those things where once we get lots, I would anticipate that we'd be up to 23 probably pretty quickly, once lots are available. Looking at median value of owner-occupied housing, this is one where I would say the American Community Survey has me a little perplexed by their number, because, you know, they show the value at 148.5, much lower than the county or the state. You'll notice the next few tables, I included Dane County, mainly because Dane County is a large driver on our housing market, because when we went to the CET and had all the public feedback, a lot of the reasons why people are moving here, other than, you know, I mean, it's a small town, it's affordable, and then I heard a ton, it's not Sun Prairie, it's not Dane County. So we're attracting people to our community because of Dane County. So knowing how our prices compare to Dane County, I thought was something that I should include, and really didn't take that much extra work to create. So the next couple you'll see Dane County are in there. So median rent, I looked, you can see 2018 we're at just over 816, just above the county, obviously well below Dane County. Comparable to the state. The state's a little bit higher than us for median rents. You know, one thing though, I guess I would say is, you know, going back to the table with the housing starts, we haven't had very many housing starts, so it's not surprising that if you're not adding units, the newer units are probably gonna have higher rents. So the fact that rents are kind of staying in line with the state or the county is, I guess, probably not that surprising to me. One of the next few tables that I put together were from, is data from the census that I find as things that we need to keep in our mind as we're looking at housing, and that's, the big thing is affordability. I mean, that's been a huge issue. One thing I just want to note before we go through these tables is the second paragraph on page 4-6 says many factors influence the affordability data from the Census Bureau. And there are a lot of factors that are going to influence, you know, like just to name a few, it's, you know, interest rates, utility expenses, property taxes, you know, where people are employed or if their employment changes, income levels, consumer choice, and then supply. I mean, you know, like consumer choice, you know, like some people will go and say, well, I can afford a $300,000 house, so I'm going to buy a $300,000 house, when they might be better off at a $250,000 house. So there's a lot of things that go into it. So that's leading into the fact that when you look at and this is, sorry for the alphabet soup, but selected monthly owner cost as a percentage of household income, which is, I'm not going to pronounce that, I'm just going to say it. When you look at table 4.7, you can see how we compare to Columbia County and Wisconsin. The one thing that I always look at, so the first table is for owner occupied with a mortgage. The one thing I look for is that total that's over 30%. HUD defines affordable housing as basically 30% of your monthly household costs. So 30.4% of those who have owner-occupied houses with a mortgage in Columbus are over that 30% threshold, which is slightly higher than the state or the county. So it would make you think that we don't have enough affordable housing when you look at that figure. Also looking at the same measurement, but for those without a mortgage, and there we're slightly better than the state or the county in having those over that 30% threshold. We're at 12.4, and the county and the state are higher at 14% of and then when you look at the gross rent as a percentage of household income, so for the renters, there's roughly just under 40%. So we're somewhere in between the county and the state as far as the census's measurement of affordability. That being said, as I put the disclaimer out there, there's many factors that influence this. So it's important to keep this in mind, but this isn't, I wouldn't call this the gospel. But it's something that I definitely want to be cognizant of and know these numbers. One of the other tables, moving on to 4.10, looking at housing sales. So last time, and you'll see in the next table, last time we reviewed this, we wanted to have some more localized data, and I did provide that, but I still think it's important to look at the trends at the county level, especially Columbia, Dane, and for the state. So you can see here trends for median prices for the county, Columbia County, Dane County, and the state. And no surprise, the median prices for sales are going up. I mean, I think everybody's witnessed that over the last 4 or 5 years. Also, I used the same data and put it into figure 4.1 to kind of see linear, and you notice obviously it dipped during the housing bubble in the late 2000s, early teens, but now things are going up quickly. The one thing I was able to get, thanks to Meister Realty, he gave me their MLS listings of homes sold in Columbus. So what he was able to provide me was the number of homes sold per year since 2015 and through August 1st of this year, and then the average price. So you can see that 2018 was a good year with 115, but generally it's kind of held steady at that 80-ish range. But the one thing you notice is the average sale price has gone up to $214,000 as of last year. So, going back to one of the tables where I said, well, maybe the American Community Survey data isn't perfect, looking at the 214, I would say that's more accurate than the 148 that was the median home value, according to the American Community Survey. Now, granted, a home value versus sales it's two different things, but I think property values on the whole are going up with the spike right now we're seeing into the sales. So that is the data I have, and then I got into the goals, objectives, and policies again. Now this one is, I don't have as many populated yet, and a lot of these were from the old comp plan and looked like, for the most part, they still applied to what we'd want to do here. So, number one, provide a variety of housing types to meet existing housing needs and encourage future growth within the city. I mean, when we did the roadmap, having a variety of housing was a huge issue, and then meeting. So, and this goal is so general. I mean, I think it also includes things like affordability and workforce housing when you think about it. Objectives: create attractive, safe neighborhoods that reinforce the existing character. Create mixed-use neighborhoods that bring a range of housing types, densities, and costs. And then make sure that when our building inspectors out there, that they're built in a way that's deemed safe by industry standards. So that's where having GEC as or whoever we would have as our inspector go out there, making sure when these things are getting built, they're being built properly and they'll last for a long time. Going into policies, these were essentially, a lot of these were policies that were in the last plan that I thought made a lot of sense, but the one that, number 7 is the one that I've been cognizant of and trying to work on, is promote the renovation of residential uses in upper stories of downtown buildings in an effort to increase affordability and enhance vitality of the downtown area. Since I've been here, I probably went through a handful of buildings now with the state historical society trying to get somebody to get historic tax credits to renovate their project. And so far, I haven't had any takers, but I mean, that's something that I've always felt is needed because, there's probably 70 to 80 buildings downtown, and there's a lot that have 2 stories, and there's a lot of that, there's probably a good 30 to maybe 40 units that are essentially mothballed or not being used or really in need of repair. So that's something where, especially when we heard during the roadmap process how a lot of our community wants to see our downtown revitalized, having more people living down there would be a step in the right direction. So any question on housing goals, objectives, and policies? I know this is going to be a long meeting, so.
Yeah, the only thing I just add is I really am happy to see 7, and I think that would be, a great thing if we could work on that in some way, at least support it. Because you're right, it helps in so many ways, affordability, vitalizing downtown, which vitalizes the businesses, which just builds on itself. So 7's fantastic. Thanks for adding that.
And as a related thing and kind of in the same vein as parks being close to where people live, I wonder if this belongs maybe associated with number 2 under objectives. But you talk about a variety of housing types, densities, and costs in a particular area, but integrating that with some of the, things, commercial type things that residents use.
Yeah.
I think for a large part, Columbus is kind of, there's a whole area where there's all the, highway commercial, right, out by Dix and James, right? And that's a little bit separate from the residential areas. I mean, you can walk to them, but they're not really integrated with. I always think of how well Sun Prairie's downtown seems to work, and that just.
No,
I realize that's maybe a shining gold standard, but hey, you got to have goals, right?
So that's a very good point, and something I will definitely add to goals or to objectives and policies. Something all along of making walkable neighborhoods. And to that point, when we went through the Roadmap 2050 process, and we got the feedback for the citizen engagement team, we always heard, we love the small town feel, we love the small town feel, and that's something when you're putting the pen to paper and actually starting to implement it, it's like, well, how do you exactly do that? Because what I think is a small town feel might differ from you and you and you. But your example of Dix, I think, is spot on, and I've had it in the back of my mind, is that Dix and James is great, but, for the amount of traffic that goes through there and having, 2 lanes through and 2 turn lanes, it's not very pedestrian friendly, and it's not.
I walk up there. I walk over to Walgreens or to the bank.
Well,
It's daunting. Not everybody would do that.
I'm assuming you have to sprint across the street, or is there technically a pedestrian island out there good enough
There's
for
a
you to use?
pedestrian island, and I have long legs, so that 10 minutes for a half mile doesn't apply to me.
But I guess
Yeah,
it's
brisk. Sure.
Yeah. My thought has been, as our community grows, potentially to the west and to the south, to the 73 exit, is making sure that the Park Avenue exit, as things grow down by the hospital, doesn't repeat the same things that are out by, Dix and James, because, it is, having a vision where we want that to stay 2 lanes. And I know it's not necessarily our road, because it is, sorry, Brad, it is DOT highway. I'm not trying to, but, if we have that vision of, well, this is what we want this to be, I think, DOT will work on it, and that's probably where, having some clear goals, objectives, and policies in place, and then eventually maybe having some sort of design on what we want to see for certain areas, especially, for that gateway area where I've seen the landowner out there previously did a traffic impact analysis, and it basically did all my work for me for laying out what I think the future land use map should be, because it has all of what the property owner wants to see for the future land use map. I'm like, well, I think this is perfect when you look at it for how it was designed and laid out, and it just made sense with, a mix of, multifamily and a mix of single family, a mix of industrial, a mix of retail and office / commercial. It really would be great for our community, but then having the road infrastructure to support that area with all the mixed uses going on there, it's like, well, how big do you want it to be? So that is a very good point about the walkability, because honestly, most of Columbus is very walkable. It might not be a straight grid pattern, but there's a grid pattern, and you can, as we grow and we put sidewalks in on our streets, it will help connect and make it easier to walk to places. And no, I agree, walkability is a key issue for housing. So, and then it has so many added other benefits of the walkability, health benefits, and just I think it's an amenity, and it attracts people to town if you have a strong bike pedestrian network. So
That begs the philosophical question: if I walk down to Culver's and get a double bacon cheeseburger, is that really a health benefit?
what?
You're probably gonna go into it, so.
Right. All right. Yeah. Now I'm just teasing. All right.
Well,
Can I chime in?
yes.
I think that's an excellent point, bringing up that intersection, but I know that the land, the road that connects Quick Trip and Pick and Save is not city-owned, but I would just obviously like to refrain from creating any situations like that where, we have the only grocery store in town that does not have any walkable, safe access, in my opinion. Culver's is one thing to walk to, but the Pick and Save is definitely worse.
Good point.
And so I guess that's a concern for me if you're talking about creating other areas, use like that, like along Park Avenue and things like that, where there's no private drive entrances, that can't have, city sidewalks connected or at least a walking path or bike path or something of that nature.
Okay, yeah. No, it is, and that's a good point about the Pick and Save. At least with the James Street project, when that was completed in 2018 for west of Dix, I think, right? There's at least sidewalk in front of Pick and Save now. Obviously, there isn't sidewalk where probably is the most convenient place to have it, up the private driveway, but yeah, that is a good point.
There's no access though from that sidewalk that goes underneath the bridge, if I'm not mistaken. I think that there's a fence there. Are you talking about on James Street?
No, so in front of Pick and Save, there's a sidewalk now, is what I'm saying.
Oh, yeah.
You'd have to cut through their lawn to get there, and obviously half the time when there's snow there, you're not going to do it. But if they chose to put a sidewalk in to connect to that, they would basically make their store a little bit more pedestrian friendly. But that being said, I don't know how many people would actually loop out there to use it. They'd probably go the short way.
Around, yeah, because most people use that private drive entrance that's
Perhaps this is,
relatively narrow.
perhaps this is off topic, but I think it's related to my mind at least. We're talking walkability, and there's a lot of sidewalks. We're putting new sidewalks in Hibbert as well, but if you're going from like one edge of the city, let's say River Road, and you're going over to Pick and Save, you can walk it, but in my mind's eye, it'd be really great to have maybe a pocket of, whether it be on downtown or whatever, but like a pocket of, you can stop here. You don't have to walk from here all the way over here. You can go neighborhood points. The library is a perfect example of that. You can access it from everywhere. It's sort of like the parks. The half a mile or whatever. But if we're talking about the development over by the hospital, You know, I mean, I know everything's already built per se, but, you know, like, maybe there could be some future thought on like interspersing, you know, like, a mini, I like the mini grocery store or whatever, you know, like halfway better into the city, so that it's not all on, you know, like the outer edge that you have to walk a million miles. I know it's not a million miles, but, you know.
Yeah. Well, there's the commercial on the edge of the city, that's, you know, it's always challenging because that's where they want to be, and that's, you know, honestly, when you get into like parking and like, it's just, there's the space is what's out there. That's kind of what has driven that over the years, is as people need to, you know, to have, you know, 8,000 cars or 8,000 parking spots in front of their place, you're not going to get that in the city. You're going to go out. So that's kind of, but you did hit on something that probably should be addressed during transportation, is better connectivity, because, you know, you're right. If you're on River Road, there's one way in, one way out, and there doesn't connect. And if you're down in some of the other subdivisions in town, there's one way in, one way out, really, pedestrian wise. So that's something that I think would be looked at under the transportation element, so.
I know it's sort of
Yeah.
off topic, but.
Sorry. I
Yep.
didn't mean to interrupt you. If I'm not mistaken, that grant that you applied for the bike path would solve quite a bit of those issues if we were to end up getting that grant, or if the city were to be able to just invest in that independently regardless of the grant. I think the plan of connecting some of those bike paths would be very helpful for walkability.
Yeah, the TAP grant that we applied to would make some connections through Kiwanis Park. It'd make some connections, or well, it'd kind of enhance the connections that are already there through Kiwanis Park, but the Fireman's Park, and then also kind of where Cardinal Estates, there's actually a trail in Cardinal Estates subdivision right now, and it doesn't connect to anything, and this project would make it connect, and it would come out by where Farnham meets 73, and it would connect up to the elementary school, and it would connect all the way out to Tower Drive. So it would really make getting, well, and we wrote it as a safe routes to school plan. It would really make the connectivity to the high school and the elementary school, really, it would enhance it. And now that we know that the elementary school is going to be there for the foreseeable future with the referendum, I think it only strengthens the need for that project. So, but yeah, I think pedestrian, I think we could definitely, if we get that grant, I think that would be the start of trying to find other funding for other projects, because I think there'd be other projects that we could achieve, so.
Yeah, like with River Road, which I think it was Paul that brought up. I'm trying to distinguish everybody's voices here. You know, if we could get more walkability or access besides the one way in and one way out, I think that would be amazing. And then also the city-owned strip of land between the Warner Street Park and Dick Street. I think we've talked about that before.
Yeah.
In council meetings. I don't remember exactly where the funding was coming from out of there.
Yeah.
Potentially.
Just like with the utilities and community facilities, share any comments, any things to add. I will be reviewing this, you know, continually until it's a final draft. So, I mean, just because I show this now, and I fully anticipate at a certain point, the city administrator will have some feedback and others will have feedback. So this will change between now and October, when we have a final draft that's going to go to a public hearing and be ready for approval. So it is what it is. Next month, there will be a few more chapters, none that will be as data intensive as the housing or the demographics. I mean, there's just a lot of data that ends up with those two chapters. So with that, there's the going, not to steal your thunder, but I don't think is there any other questions with the chapters of the comp plan? All right. I think we're good. We can move back to old business.
All right, our last agenda item is the draft site plan ordinance.
Okay, so I will kick this, oh no, that's not what I wanted. So, okay, we've discussed this for a while now. And, where did I save that? Here we go, sorry. And I think when I originally sent out this section, I must have sent an old one because I saw some comments from Uriah and I thought I addressed one of the issues, but Uriah shared some comments and I've incorporated them into the document and I've left this as the track changes so you can kind of see what I did. I figured that was the easiest way to go through this tonight. So, I'll go through kind of the new, like, what we've added or what's changed. We have under 2, applicability and governance, essentially, basically outlines when this is, or when this may be imposed. I did leave buildings of any size except for structures under 200 feet. Just because, you know, there are times when we're dealing with single-family homes, we're having like a nice site plan where they go out and actually get like a plat of survey where they're going to build is going to be helpful or required. Most specifically, like if they're building somewhere near the shoreline zoning, or they're building somewhere near a river, or building somewhere near the floodplain, having some sort of plat of survey that's done by a surveyor that we could require so we know where their building is absolutely out of the floodplain, I think is something that I would like to reserve. And I say under 200 square feet, then basically if you're just putting up your 10 by 12 shed, I still need to verify that you're gonna meet our zoning, but I don't need a full-blown site plan. So that was the intent behind that. Also, the grading, I changed that to 4,000 square feet because that is what's required under state statute. And then I think the other one under B that was given to me was any site which proposes to place. I guess I probably should read through it because Uriah is the one who gave me the comments. But it says any. Okay, so A was buildings of any size except for structures under 200 feet. So that was, as I said, if I need to have a more developed site plan for a single family home, then we can, you know, I can, as building or zoning administrator, I can request that. Any site which proposes to place concrete, gravel, asphalt, or other hardscape, so basically impervious surface, exceeding 4,000 square feet, you know, that's the same as the erosion control standard for land disturbance. So I just kept that consistent with that measurement. Under C, it says any conditional or permitted use of an existing building that requires off-street parking under our zoning code, Wood 14, which is the section of our municipal code, which is the zoning code, and then grading in excess of 4,000 square feet. And then the authority, I don't think that, did you have a comment on that, Uriah, under section 3?
I did.
Because I don't know if I addressed that.
No, there was an additional comment where basically the site plan, well, it was contents of the site plan. Site plan required in this section shall contain all of the following. What I thought might be more appropriate is to give the zoning administrator the latitude to, during a pre-application meeting, sit down and go, these are the things out of this list that go on the site plan.
Yeah.
As opposed to using the phrase shall in an ordinance where, you know, then they're forced to sort of address everything in their application. we've already exercised some latitude with allowing you in paragraph 2 to decide whether or not certain things require a site plan at all. So it's similarly extended to that latitude within that longer section.
So, I mean, we could basically, so you're just saying take the shall and turn it to a may? Or,
Site plan required under this section,
oh, wait.
no, I had it in my email, and that's why I wrote it down, so it would be easy to remember. I might have it here. Essentially, the idea was, if you identify something that needs a site plan, you meet with the applicant, so that the applicant is clear what parts of this requirement you're gonna wanna see.
Yeah.
So-
And generally, that happens now. I don't always sit down in person necessarily. It's usually over the phone. And a lot of times they come into the development team as well. Now that's not a formal group that's designated by the city, and being that a lot of what is discussed there is somewhat confidential, there's benefits to having it not as a formal group, because if it was a formal group, then we'd have to notice it and they'd be open to the public. It's easier. And basically everything that comes with the DT has to be approved by either plan commission, council, or both, or whatever other entities need the approval. So it's not like any decisions are being made when things are being reviewed. I guess.
My main question is, if I were an applicant, would I know where to start and what rules apply to me? That's what's been honestly somewhat bothersome to me about this whole thing. And it's late, so I don't want to try to become argumentative, but I think those are some of the critical elements really to address.
Okay.
I mean, even what you were just saying about, well, it's not really formal and da-da-da-da-da, which is nice in a way, it doesn't give an applicant clarity, right? I'm somebody who wants to build a nice little 14,000 square foot small ranch home, right? This applies to me. Sorry, 1,400. Wow, I got extra zeros in my head. Thank you.
Yeah,
I'm usually not bad with
14,000,
math. Oh, man. So, right, I've got a 1,400 square foot ranch. This applies to me.
Well, where are you building it? Is it close to the floodplain? Is it close? I mean,
Well,
there's
I'm just
certain
saying,
things where-
I'm just saying I might fall under this.
Correct, you might, and, if I'm not requiring a site plan, I know Dion is when they're building a home. So, I mean, generally, you need to show what you're building on the lot, whether it's done.
Right, for your
In a lot of
for your
times-
building permit. right.
Correct. So, I think the intent, when this started, it really, I guess, the intent in my mind was, let's say, we'll pick on Nate Roberts. So, Nate says, hey, Matt, I'm gonna do this 50,000 square foot addition. Great, you're already zoned industrial, it's a permitted use. And I'm gonna say, I'm requiring you to give me a landscaping plan, a lighting plan, a grading plan. And when you looked at our code previously, the only place where it listed the required planning documents was if it was a conditional use. But if you're a permitted use, it really was vague on what documents that we could essentially require you to provide. And now, some of those, like in the case I gave you, if Nate was doing a large expansion, he would still need state-approved building plans, and most likely he would have to go through the gamut of the plans that we'd have anyways. But it's to that, and nobody's ever challenged the city on it, but it was one of those things where as I looked at our code, I'm like, we need to have some sort of mechanism in place that if something's a permitted use, that we have the authority to require these plans because we need them to review them, so we make sure that as things are built, they're built correctly and they're built to last, and that there's no, essentially there's no public safety issues with the way these are constructed, because a lot of these end up being buildings where the public goes into them. So, and maybe, with the change in, yeah, maybe I've let this get away from the original intent of this ordinance. So I guess my question to you is, this is on council's agenda for Tuesday. I could, for a discussion at the cow. If we don't feel like we're close to something to move forward to them, I could just table it on Tuesday. I mean, or just at least have a preliminary discussion with council, because the only council members that know about this are Alderman Pifron and Alderman Ryan, or Alderperson, woman, sorry. Or councilman, I guess we call them councilmen here, I don't know why.
No, I think we're close, and like I said, maybe I'm just
No, I'm
getting argumentative. 'Cause
No,
late.
it's fine, because I
need a
know,
nap.
I know there's, it's, it is changing a law, and, when we do it, we want to make sure we do it.
You want it to apply to the situations
Correct. We
you
wanna do
feel
it
it should
right.
apply to, and not have it apply arbitrarily to a billion
And two,
little
I mean,
situations.
if it said shall, and it says shall contain, and they forgot something, I'm sure, Matthew, you're gonna tell them, you need to fill this out, you need to add this.
Yeah.
You're not gonna say, oh, no, we're not gonna let you build.
No.
I think. But I can see
Yeah,
your bias.
but write it right in
now.
there, so it's clear to everybody, and not some angry neighbor that says, well, you're not following the ordinance. You know what happens.
No, I've had enough with angry neighbors in the last couple of weeks, so, sorry. Do you want me to go through the other suggested comments that I got from?
All the ones in the track changes are, it's fine. It was more
Okay.
of an organizational
The
nature,
only
just
one I
things that
wasn't
flow a
really
little
sure
better.
on was getting the seal of approval from a professional engineer.
My comment was that tends to be onerous for sites unless they need public utilities, stormwater management, and what was the other one? Off-street parking,
Yeah.
so.
Well, and, that would be one where if you're just building a single-family home and we just need a plat of survey to show that you're not gonna be building your property in the floodplain, or, using a plat of survey as your site plan to show where the property is gonna be. I think that would, you're right, that one would be onerous in that example, but I think in other cases, I think that's what we'd want to see, like, going back to the Roberts example, if he was doing a large expansion, we'd want to see that stamped plans from engineers, for sure, so.
Right,
Or at least I know
because it
Dave-
would likely have one or more of those things that I named.
Yeah. I'm
But-
sorry, I didn't.
Determine applicable by the zoning administrator?
Yeah, we could add that.
When we talked about this before, didn't we use the language that was something at the discretion of the planning director? Where we were trying to be a little flexible, but we wanted to be specific as to when, it would apply or not, so that they would know.
Yeah.
What stage in the process they would know.
Yeah, right. Not just like, oh, I'll just pick a couple of these that I want to, and who's gonna tell me otherwise? Because, if they gotta pay for money for any of these site plans, they're just gonna go, why are you making me do this? It doesn't say I have to. You're being mean. You're singling me out. Sometimes it is good to have the force of the clear law behind you to say, this is what we all agreed to in the city, and this is what we need to do. Everybody does this. As long as it's not ridiculously onerous, that works. I can't think of all the scenarios where this would be a problem for people, but sometimes it's good to have the certainty behind you
Yeah.
and authority behind you. But I certainly appreciate the flexibility. sometimes those don't go hand in hand. So it's a very difficult question, it really is. But I appreciate we're trying to find the right path. You know, Matthew, you do a fantastic job at this. Someday you'll have a predecessor that who knows how they'll manage this. And
Well,
it's
and
hard to predict.
the more clear it is for me, it helps me too. I mean, then
Yes.
it takes, you know, I don't want to be out there where I have too much discretion, because, you know, if it gets to the point where somebody might say, well, you gave this guy a break, why not?
Yeah, you
give
just
me
cost me
some?
$1,000 for a plan.
Yeah, no, yeah, and to be honest with you, and probably in my time, and I can tell from way before my time, I don't think we've been stringent enough in demanding, like, great sets of plans for some of the development that's happened. Sometimes when I look back at our records, I'm like, oof, that's, how'd that fly, you know?
Yeah, I did have a concern when I was reading through this, is you may, at the moment, you may say, well, I don't really need that to approve this, I don't need that. But once that opportunity's gone, that information can't be brought back sometimes. So as you're saying right now, the records don't show this stuff. Well, if they were a little bit more stringent, you know, you could find where some of the utilities are, or where some of the, you know, the site plans are, because they would be in these records. So
Yeah.
I would lean a little more towards more information, not a ridiculous amount, but I think there's a lot of things we don't know that we'll need in the future.
Yeah, and I would say since our current city engineer's been here, I think he's done a wonderful job of making sure whatever plans for new development comes in, and he has them. I know there has been times since I've started where I'm like, I can't find this in our files. I'm like, Jason, do you have this? And he'll email it over to me. But we also have on our GIS site, and I've been populating that when things have been approved, is you can put, like, attach to make a point shape file on the GIS system, and on that point file you can attach documents to it. So if site plans are approved, I try to do my best to go out there and make sure the approved site plan's on the GIS site, and then I get rid of all the paper copies, because Lord knows when we're going through the approval process, I get 10 different versions of a site plan, and then 2 years later when I'm trying to remember, well, what site plan was approved? You know, I have to go back. Actually, I was working with Drexel to make sure they finished up their landscaping, and I had that issue where finally I had to figure out, I'm like, there was like 3 different landscaping plans, and I finally figured out what the correct one was, and then once I knew what the correct set of plans were, I made sure I put the right document out there. So it's working through those issues. Yeah, but I think it's getting better, and as long as we start today and keep moving forward and having this, you know, in 10, 20 years down the line, our records are going to be much better for what's being built currently. Still might be missing some of the older buildings, but that's just the way it goes.
Right.
And there's still, I think, in the basement somewhere, a bunch of plans that, when we get to a point, maybe some summer, we'll hire an intern and say, here's your project to go down through the basement and find these plans, and maybe we'll have them scanned and digitized or something like that, if that ever becomes a need. I don't know if it ever will, but I think there's potential to take care of some of those older records too, if we need to.
The one thing I'd add too is, that would help is if you're going through this with people and you're talking to them, which is fantastic, but you do have some kind of verbal agreements, like, yeah, that sounds good, do this, blah, blah, blah. But if it doesn't get written down because we didn't require some plan filed, sometimes that can get lost. I'm looking things like, you know, parking space dimensions and things are on here. Is once, you know, those are the parts that we agreed to allow these things to go forward. And if it's not written down, then it doesn't exist. That was kind of our saying a lot of times. So when we try to be flexible, we try to be informal to make it easier, we lose some of that stuff. And then again, these agreements don't exist. Like, I know I told you I was going to make these parking spaces really big, And well, you know, the new guy taped them differently, so sorry. So I think I would lean towards a little more information again,
Yeah.
just to be helpful.
Well, and the good thing is like once something like this is approved, it's, you know, kind of like in the conditional use permit, you put it in the application and it basically serves as a checklist for them and for me. So, the more, yeah. So, I guess my question then is.
Can I interrupt while I'm thinking?
Sure.
Maybe consider a spot where you could, if you wanted to be flexible, to Raya's point, is to maybe put a phrase in that says, you could waive some of these at your discretion. Start out with the full list and say you could waive them if we needed to. That way we start with a full list, a checklist, that's a great point. But if you find out you're building a shed on stilts, you know, of brick, maybe you don't need to do a $5,000 floodplain analysis. Where you could say, this doesn't fit, this is ridiculous, I'm not going to require you for this one.
Yeah.
So that's, you know, instead of the other end going, I'm going to add all these things to your list, I'm going to cost you all this money, is go the other way and say, here's the list everybody uses, but I realize this doesn't make any sense for you to do in this project.
Yeah.
Because you know you're going to get all kinds of projects.
Well, I mean, you know, like for tonight's example, I mean, when Troy originally talked with me, I thought he was going to be finishing out the other parking lot and maybe adding on some building. And then after a while, after he thought about it, he's like, no, we just want to get up and running. We want to focus on finishing out the building. And then from there, we'll go through, if we decide to expand in Columbus, we'll come back in with more plans. And I said, that's fine. I mean, if you're not going to be doing a parking lot, I mean, if you're just going to take over what's there, we don't need to see, you know, any new lighting plan that's already been approved. Essentially, just give us the building plans, and that's where we, you know. So basically, I waive, well, I just say waive, but said these don't apply right now. When they do apply, you need, you know, that's why I put that condition that any future development needs plans. And maybe it's just because it's late and it's been a long day. So Uriah and everybody sounded okay with the changes under section 4. Is there anything else I'm missing for this, or is this at least ready for comment at the council level?
In my opinion, I think it's ready for comment at council level. Like you pointed out, you know, there's council members here that have
Yeah.
heard this discussion and can kind of carry the torch forward. And
Yeah, well, and, you know, the other thing is I don't, you know, this might come back, council might say, well, I'm not really a big fan of this, rethink this and send it back, and that's perfectly fine with me. I know next week, or next Tuesday is gonna be their first review of this. I talked about bringing it to them in the interim between the last 2 plan commission meetings, but then I felt, I'm like, well, this might be one where it's just better off where it comes out of plan commission, and then the COW reviews it first, and then it goes to council. And as I said, if there's some movement back and forth, that's fine. I pretty much go to most council meetings, anyway. So.
Matt,
Yeah.
so this is going to the cow or
I-
discussion prior to the regular meeting, correct?
Yes, it's going to the COW on the 18th, and then if COW is okay with it, then it goes to council on September 1st. If they're not okay with it, it can come back to plan commission, it can stay at the COW, they can say, we don't want to approve this ever, and then we'll just say, all right, well, then, that's that,
And
so.
prior to the cow, you will make the amendment to, I think it's section 4 that Uriah is concerned about?
Yes, I have them in track changes, and I'll probably actually go to my desk and probably do that before I leave tonight, so Pat has it in the morning, because I know Pat's got to get the packets out, so,
Okay. All right, thank you.
yep. I guess I do need a how did I word it? I did say take potential action, right? I'm just shitting.
I don't think there was any action to take. That's been consistent with how we've treated this.
Yeah.
It's kind of been a discuss and comment and work group session kind of style stuff,
Yeah,
so.
no, I didn't put as take potential.
It's not a
action.
zoning ordinance and therefore it
Correct.
doesn't
Well,
need
and
a, right?
that's, and that's, when I was talking with Paul, with all the excitement that went on this month, I didn't put that solar panel, ordinance, on here, just because I didn't have, I didn't have time to address it, and by the time so I was just like, we can wait on that one. But then I was talking with Paul, because this is going under chapter 78, we didn't have to have a public hearing for this, because it's not part of the zoning code, it's part of the planning section. And ultimately, even though you're reviewing it, technically, the way I understand it, it's more, that section is more, it ends up being more of a council approval anyways than the plan commission. But this started with plan commission. I know, when it started, I think Ed Johnson was on here, and he was on the ordinance committee, and he was pretty adamant that plan commission should be reviewing this, and I guess at the time I didn't disagree with them, but well, long story short, this is going to move forward to the cow, and this is basically the recommendation that we have from this body. Being that council's the one that has to approve this at that level, and it's going to have 2 levels of review, I don't think we technically have to have a formal motion and recommendation. So, sorry, that was a long-winded answer.
Okay, any other discussion on this proposed ordinance? Otherwise, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
I'll second that.
Motion and second, all those in favor signify by aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
All right, we are adjourned.
And sorry, Jason, that your first
Okay.
one back was a
It was a very productive evening. Thank you.